This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Any changes to the agenda? Oh, we got approval of minutes. Sorry about that.
Motion to approve the minutes from April. May 3rd special meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Changes to agenda. Hearing none, moving on to presentations. MRS, presentation library design and concept.
You should be on the phone.
Hi, Kate, are you online? Hey, Paul and Kate, this is Willie here in Appleton. We're ready for your presentation when you are.
You guys are fast. No grass grows under your feet. All right, I'll jump into it. Kate, are you ready? You all met me previously. My colleague Kate Shaw is with me today, and we'll just do a quick walkthrough of the project and then entertain any questions you have. I'll just say I had a medical procedure this morning, so I'm slightly out of it. So that's why Kate is going to do the presentation today. It'll probably be a little bit more cogent that way. But as a preview, I'll just say we have been talking with Cindy and Willie and some of the people on the council, and we think our recommendations are in the best interest of the community, and we look forward to having a good dialogue about the project now and then also going forward. Kate, I'll turn it over to you. I don't hear you. I can't hear you. You may have to call in.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Whew. All right, excellent. So I know you have copies of our presentation, and I'll just give you a brief overview of how we put things together. So we toured with our team and the consultant team, along with H+U Construction. We all toured the facility, and we met afterwards and looked at the existing conditions and tried to assess where it made the most sense to put the library. Assuming that there's a limited pot of money, we want to, pick a location that kind of works for the library, works within the whole building, so that you're not hamstrung down the future when you're trying to put in the community center and the event center. We want the library to be located somewhere that makes sense, and we also want to use the money wisely. And so I won't go through every page of the presentation, but as you can see, the existing building systems are in tough shape. The electrical is original to the building, and it's still working, which is great, but expecting it to last much longer could be optimistic. The mechanical system is also in tough shape. There's some water infiltration issues on that basement level, and there's a pretty high potential that there's some additional remediation that would have to happen for hazardous materials that are in the basement. So for many reasons, we think it makes the most sense to locate the library in the 6,900 square foot location within the building. There are great windows in that area. Ideally, we would open up some of those glass block windows to the interior again to allow more daylight into that space. The bathrooms are where you would want them to be, which is great. In some of the other parts of the building, the bathrooms are not ideally located, and we likely want to move plumbing around a bit more. And the building structure is a pretty simple post and beam system. And so the columns are minimal, we've got good spans, and it works with the library shelving, which is also always a key in any library plan layout. So if you will look at it's page 18, and I realize we did not put page numbers on there. So it's the page that has the blue diagram with the option A and option B budgets. And so, you know, in looking at our project budget, typically the project budget includes construction, furnishings costs, professional fees, permit fees. So when it's all said and done for a smaller project, your construction cost ends up being around 65% of the overall project cost. And we find that to be pretty close for a lot of projects, library projects this size. So when we take the $760,000 for the building and we spread that out over the 6,900 square feet, that gives us about $110 a square foot to do the renovation, which should be enough. It will be tight, but doable. You know, if we try and reuse as much as possible. If we try and take that same amount of money and spread it out into the 9,200 square foot area of the building, it's very thin and it's a lot harder. And then in addition to that, we open ourselves up to potentially needing to do work in the basement and to fix some of those infiltration issues. We would hate to spend money to put in a new mechanical system and have nice dry air upstairs, knowing that we've got water issues downstairs that will likely migrate upward. So our impression is that it makes a lot of sense to locate the library in that 6,900 square foot area. It leaves most of the building open for a rec center and an event center in the future. And those are the spaces that really do have bigger spans where you want more space. The library can live with those columns in the middle. Those other areas are really free and clear for future work. And before I dive into the library plan proper, I'll pause here. Do you guys have any questions or comments about what we've said so far?
Are you pretty confident with the numbers? I mean, with everything going up, I mean, is that something we have to be concerned with?
So these are really broad numbers. We're actually, sometime this week, we're wrapping up doing a more detailed cost document that we'll give to H+U tomorrow afternoon. They're going to look at things more closely. So our next step is, to come back to you guys in June. I think your meeting's on the 16th, and then we'll have firmer numbers than what we're showing here today.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I should note too, the project budget, we build escalation into it so that that's part of the whole project budget. There's escalation. We put a contingency on the entire thing of 5%. So we try and make sure that we're showing you realistic numbers, not best case scenario numbers. It's always better to get in under than to be just a bit over.
Kate, could you speak a little bit for what is driving the price difference from the 6,900 square feet versus the 9,200 square feet?
Yeah, the difference is really, you have a pot of money that's the same. And so when you're trying to do a renovation, if you're doing it to a bigger area, you just have less money to spend per square foot. And where the cost is tricky in that 9,200 square foot area is that part of the building has very few windows, so we would want to do more to the exterior. We would want to get daylight in there. The plumbing, we don't have the bathrooms there, so we'd be adding plumbing. So not only do we just have less money to spread around, we're actually trying to spend more on the things that are usually pretty expensive for any renovation.
Are there structural characteristics of the 9,200 square feet option that also drive the price up?
No, well, Paul, you're shaking your head. Am I forgetting? So,
Yeah,
The
the bearing,
wall.
the bearing.
oh,
will
yes,
have to deal
yes.
with.
Yeah, there is a fire separation, a 3-hour fire separation wall going through that space. So that limits flexibility for a library. You know, generally you want, if you have one staff working, you want good eyes throughout the entire space. And that's not insurmountable, but it does make it more difficult. And the glass windows and doors you would want to put in that wall to maintain a fire rating are very expensive. So again, there are more things working against us in that location.
There's also the issue of all the environmental issues in the basement. They would have to be dealt with. You can't just close off the basement by the building code. You'd actually have to deal with the basement because people could be going not just wood, but could be going down there. So that's a cost that you see kind of in bold letters in the left-hand column of page 18. That is really a big question mark. And my fear is that would siphon off a lot of money that could otherwise be used for, creating a library that you want in the community.
Are any of those building requirements going to be necessarily mitigated even with the 6,900 square foot option?
We don't think so, because there's a way that you really can separate that part of the building from the rest. It's already essentially separated with a firewall. So we might have to just put a fire rated door downstairs in the basement so that once you go down that staircase, there's a separation down there as well. And then you're truly kind of free to do whatever you want in that part of the building and ignore the rest until later.
Yeah, that's one of the values of that 6,900 square foot space is it's truly segregated from the rest of the building. So oftentimes that's seen as a disadvantage. In this case, it's actually an advantage because it keeps you from having to spend money on things that you don't want to spend money on right now.
Mm-hmm. And mechanically, having it be separate means we can leave the existing system up and running elsewhere, and really we're just chopping the end of it off for that wing. Locating the library in the middle makes it much harder to keep that existing system in place for the other pieces of the building.
Kate, this is Councilmember Heineke. We met a month or two ago about the project, and Cindy, is everything on our wish list? Did it fit into the 6,900 foot first option?
Yes and no, right? I think, our wish list was a classroom for 30, which we are fitting, but it's tight. On the other hand, we're right next to that auditorium. So if Cindy wants to have a movie night with 100 kids, we can do it right there, which is great. And in the future, when the community center is finished out, a lot of those larger rooms, it makes sense to have them in the community center anyway. That way you're likely using them more often throughout the day and throughout the week. The only other thing I would say we didn't get entirely would be a full-blown kitchen in the library, only because to put that in the community room, we end up stealing too much floor space. So there's a counter and there's a sink, and certainly, there are induction cooktops you can just take and set on a counter and plug into the wall. So I think that functionality is still there in spirit. It's just not as robust as it could be with more space. But it's also more money too.
And I'll add that when we talked with Cindy about this, she was very enthusiastic about this plan going in this location. She agreed it's the best idea, and that the minor shortcomings were manageable for her, because you are starting out with a library right now that I believe is 1,700 square feet, I think, or maybe 1,800, and this library is going to be 6,900 square feet. So that's a big jump. So it will feel, I don't want to say luxurious because, you know, this is not going to be a fancy over the top building. It's going to be a really nice space with good light quality. It's going to be efficient for staff, but it'll be a place that the community will be really proud of because it'll be nice and it'll be attractive and people will want to go there. So ultimately, I think the true test of this will be the day that you open it up and people feel like, wow, this is so great compared to what we used to have. And functionally, I think it will answer all of those needs.
And we've tried to be smart about where we put the meeting room within the library plan, you know, by keeping it to the south. If and when the community center is there, you know, if that can have rooms that are that size, the library might not need that space anymore. And we can take those walls down and then expand collection and seating space, which would be great. You know, the goal of any library room is that it does as many things as possible and that it's very flexible. So that's a little bit of how we tried to lay things out here.
Well, thank you for that.
Is it all right if Cindy comes up and talks a little bit about her perspective? Cindy, so working with MRS and members of the city council to this point, could you please share with us which option you think would be the most beneficial with our current constraints on the budget for this library moving forward?
I'm very much for this option that you're recommending. I mean, like I keep saying, it's 3 times the space that we currently have. It meets the needs of what the community, you know, we need that separation of space, more space for kids, more space for teens, giving people a place to relax and read the newspaper and not hear the kids having the fun that they have at the library. Yeah, it meets all those needs. And like Paul said, it's not fancy, but we don't need fancy. We need something that services our community. And that's what this does.
Well, thank you for that.
We've gone back and forth a number of times to make sure these things had worked too.
Does the community members present, do you guys have any questions? Thank you, Cindy. So just to wrap this up a little bit, there's 2 options being presented, option A and option B. Option A has a floor plan of 6,900 square feet. Option B has 9,200 square feet. The difference in price is controlled by the fact that they have these firewalls and that they don't have access to light. And also, as Paul mentioned, they're not sure if you select that middle space of the building, the 9,200 square feet, option B, whether you are going to have to lawfully address what's under the structure. With option A, it's slightly smaller square footage, by no means small, but you might not have to deal with that under the basement kind of issues.
So I just have one question, just kind of backing up a few pages. Looking at the site master plan, is that something that, I mean, mostly what we maybe have to talk about is the parking spaces for now, right? Or am I jumping ahead?
Now, it'd be great to hear your feedback on that. So, you know, that we're looking quickly at if you reconfigured that existing lot, which we've heard from a lot of people is hard to use, you know, what could we fit in there? And we're going to have that priced out. So we'll at least understand a cost for redoing that lot, and we can decide next month if that makes sense to bite that off now or to leave that for another phase.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Paul and Kate.
Let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you guys decide. Otherwise, Willie, I'll check in with you tomorrow.
Perfect, sure. Thank you.
Sounds
Okay.
good, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay, moving on, public hearing.
Motion to open a public hearing to consider conditional use permits and variance permit requests.
Motion has been made and seconded. There be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Variance request for Bob Emery.
The city has received variance requests and 2 conditional use permits. The variance request is from Mr. Bob Emery for the specifications of a residential plat in front of a house. And the current, the rules where they are, it can't be that size, and his sign is a little bit bigger. He has gotten the permission of his neighbors to go do it. And so my office's recommendation that city council consider approving said variance.
Going to be at the same place that was on that diagram that we've seen before.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right away across the street sidewalk.
And it's a nice sign too.
Nice sign. I'll make the motion that we grant that request.
Can we do that?
You'll do that under new business. Right now, you're just in the hearing.
All right.
And then the 2 conditional use permits, one came from Glacial Plains. They are going to be, they need a conditional use permits because our rules say that the propane tank should not be bigger than 2,000 gallons, and their propane tanks are actually 30,000 gallons. The fire chief went out there and looked at it, and he found that there was no issues with it. So it's fine. And my office recommends the city council consider approving that. Mr. Alan Tonak has requested conditional use permits to raise chickens in his residential home. He has permission from his neighbors. He's going to be raising, am I correct in stating female chickens of different sizes? No roosters, nothing against roosters, but it's only for female chickens. And since his neighbors have approved it, I'm recommending that city council consider approving these conditional use permits.
Do we have a limit on a number, or, I mean, is there, how do we? Is there something, I mean, just so you don't have 300 of them, you know?
So the request is for 6 to 12 hens.
Now, does this open up a can of worms now that anybody's going to come in and can request the same thing if we give one permit?
Everybody's subject to the same permit process. If you're asking about precedent, I'm not sure that this sets a precedent because this is not a court of law. This is city council. And in the past, the city council has afforded that same conditional use permit to others who have wanted to raise chickens.
And I know the person that did, and it was for a 4-H project.
Okay.
And it was going to be for like a 2-year period, and it was done. We're never done with 4-H.
Those are not the exact same conditions here. It's just for their personal well-being and preference. And they did meet all the requirements under the zoning code.
Are we going to limit this to chickens, or are we going to get into the hogs and the cows and the horses? And California's got that.
From my office, when we look at the zoning requests, we look at them as they come in for what they're requesting. In this moment, they're not asking for horses or chicken or cows or anything like that. They're just talking about the hens. So I'm not, if you want to ask the city attorney whether this sets up a precedent in this arena, that would be a better option.
Perfect, thank you. So kind of as Mr. Morales explained, again, it's all one individual comes in with their request, and specifically in this 6 to 12 hens, it does not open the door to say, because this person had it, the next one gets it. Again, there are factors that they're looking at as neighbors have no objection to it. It's allowing them to have other considerations. Again, you just treat everybody the same and fair, and they get to consider what this is for on its face. And so you can't necessarily say, oh, just because this one is requesting 6 to 12 hens, that opens the door for horses down the road. So it's not that broad. It's specifically this specific request for this individual. And again, factors that were counted on are none of the neighbors are objecting as well.
Well, and you'd stated it was for like a therapy thing, right? I mean, it's not to raise them, to eat them and that kind of thing. I mean, it's
We're gonna go back to a therapy horse.
Again, at that time, if someone had petitioned for a horse, my guess is you'd probably have a different recommendation because you have a different size animal and different output of that animal.
Is that something we need to address in the laws for the city to eliminate it? I mean, to get it down to just small? Can we do that legally?
The city can certainly put in place any ordinance that they want. And so if that's something that you want us to look into, we can certainly come up with some language, and that's certainly a possibility in the future.
I just don't want to get into an argument about getting bigger animals in there. And, you know, because somebody can say they want to raise 2 or 3 pot-bellied pigs because it's therapy. We're in trouble.
We can certainly take a look at that too.
And in terms of,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, in terms of public policy versus law, law is a form of public policy, but as it pertains to zoning here, again, this arena is not a courtroom, and I think we all need to come to that understanding. This is not a courtroom. Precedents are not set herein. So when we talk about this, just like Danielle said, it's a limited thing. Just because you did it once doesn't mean that. So the question is to regulate or not to regulate.
Is this a lifetime variance then?
That does give that individual residing in that property during that period, that variance. It doesn't transfer, move away from.
And let's just say neighbors do see some issues that they don't foresee right now, and does become some issue for a neighbor. What can be done at that time?
And I'd like to say something else, because as long as we're here, let's say that somebody out in the crowd here figures we don't like them and we turn them down, and they're going to come around and they're going to say, well, they didn't like me. That's why I got turned down. We're into enough of that right now that I just don't want to pile into some more. So, I mean, if you open the door, we're going to fish with this whole can of worms. That's the concern I have.
But that's a valid concern. It is part of the beauty of being a local government, that you can do the work and they can still not like you. So
it's not public comment right now.
Who's getting chicken?
that's Mr. Alan Tonak.
Alan Tonak.
Behind your house. Yep. Well, the chickens are gonna be behind you. Yes, I know.
The city will always have to respond in a limited manner pursuant to what the request is. And the city is not gonna ever, no matter who is in this position, say we're rejecting you because we don't like you. That's not a lawful way to work.
Al, do you like hamsters? Yeah.
Yes, I like it.
You
Larry,
see where,
Larry,
do you
keep it
see,
down for right now, please.
do you see where I'm coming from?
I see where you're coming from.
Because we're gonna go down a road here that I'm not real happy about going down.
I don't see geese still having chicken.
Pardon me?
I also still see geese still having chicken.
They do?
Oh, yeah.
Aren't they still in 4-H? They still got kids in school?
Not in 4-H.
Not in 4-H.
And they have a rooster.
Oh,
Must put the barker out of them.
So if a neighbor discovers that somebody who's been granted a variance of any sort, and that variance results in a nuisance to them in violation of ordinances, then there is a process by which they can bring that to the city council. We are not without a vehicle to address it, but it is up to the will of this board and the body politic to decide.
I guess basically, I just got a couple questions for you. In terms of the waste, do you have a plan for how you're gonna get that out?
In my garden.
You're gonna, okay, you're gonna put it in raw, not composted
It'll
or,
be composted and put it in my garden.
okay,
I already have one compost
okay.
going, and nobody could smell it.
Okay, that's, one concern I have.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you want to put it in the back seat of your car.
Yeah.
So, and then, it's a pretty small yard. Where are you gonna, you got enough space kind of figured out? Are you gonna have them in a coop or
Oh, I have 2 coops already.
you do? Okay. Are you planning on penning in some of the yard too, or?
No, they're already, it's self-contained.
Okay,
They're self-contained.
all right,
They won't be running around the yard. They'll be staying in.
okay. All right, thank you.
All right.
Anybody else? Motion to close a public hearing?
Second,
Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments. We got a long agenda tonight, Larry, too, so let's keep it moving here. I don't want to be here till midnight.
Hey, Danielle.
Hello.
I'd like to say, for a start, doing your brother as you have them doing to you. All right? I've got plenty to go around for this council. This ordinance, which I was always told by Roman and everybody else, any weed vascular plants other than trees, bushes, it doesn't that page. Other than ornamental plants growing that height, feet 12 inches. Well, I never once had grass anywhere near 12 inches. Everybody who knows me knows that I keep up on all my yards. So I got a reminder here about cutting my grass in a timely manner. Well, you know what? I cut my grass, close to 3 weeks, and I've cut it twice. But when I walked out my door, getting this beautiful little letter, I noticed that the city of Appleton was in complete violation. Now, Danielle, I think that's the city ordinance is imposed by the city, and the residents have to comply by it. Doesn't the city also have to comply by the same ordinance?
I appreciate your request for my legal advice, but I'm not going to entertain that tonight. Certainly, if a report comes before my desk to review for charges, then I do so, but nothing that's come before my desk.
Okay, well, I took pictures of the city parks
Okay, where are you going with this, Larry? Let's move along here.
across the street from me, and the one between my 45 East Snelling, the one in the city of Appleton stole my piece of property there. All right, because I tore a house down in Hammer, but then the city filled it in for $1,200. I still need to keep it.
Mr. Johnson, you can't make allegations that a city stole a property from you, sir,
Why not?
because it's not factual.
It's true.
Where are we going with this, Larry? Let's move on here.
Oh, I went and cut all the yards because I was sick of looking at them. And I pretty much should be paid for cutting the yards because the city was in violation. And I have pictures of all of it. Up to 8 on knees. I cut the big park. I got the Frisbee golf parks. Across the street from me, I got the 3 parks and the 3 city lots there. And then I went and cut my old piece of property, 45 East Snelling, because that was over a foot too.
Mr. Johnson, were you authorized to do that?
Yes. By your letter.
You were authorized by that letter to cut grass on public property?
You chose, let me ask you a question. Why is Rowan stopping and asking me questions
Sir,
about my building?
we cannot discuss previous employees. If you're having a disagreement with another resident, it is a private matter, not a matter of the city of Appleton.
Well, you know,
Let's
you
present the bill to the city and we'll take it under advisement. We're gonna move on here now. We're not gonna sit here and argue about this. We've done this in the previous meetings about your grass and about your stuff, so let's just move on.
right?
Yep, submit a bill and we'll take it under advisement. Thank you.
Actually, you should not submit a bill. I'm going to read something to you.
Go ahead.
Minnesota statutes 609.52 subsection 7. So subsection 4, by swindling, whether by artifice, trick, device, or any other means, obtains property or services from another person. This is a punishable crime.
Yes. Why isn't it punishable? When you went.
You saying you,
346 East Rooney, and did $385. You cut it every 7 to 10 days when I got
Sir.
that piece of property. All the
Sir.
time, I never seen any of you.
All right,
And then
Larry, this is
I
enough.
told Rowan to stay on that property. So
I
then he went
understand
to
you're
445
upset.
East Rooney and cut that for
I understand you're
$475.
upset, but there's a fallacy of composition in your argument.
So-
You are not a municipality. The Minnesota State Legislature has not authorized you to do what you're
So
saying
then
you're
how
trying
can
to
you be
do.
authorized to take $385 for the one property?
Because the legislator said that they can.
When I never had
Larry, we're done with this. We're done. Let's move on. Yep, let's go.
Because my
Thank you.
property was never 12 inches. So you were actually violating when you sent me the bill.
Just to clarify, in 2021, we respected your right to due process and due notice, and we sent you a reminder to help you so that you don't get billed.
Well, every time I get one of these, I'm going to get billed for something.
The notice serves as enough time so that you know that we are going to check. Thank
I
you.
don't know why I'm mentioning here.
Okay, Larry, please move on. Do you want to be removed from here and what's the plan? here?
How about when I asked you about getting your support for mayor? Remember how you treated me?
I don't remember talking to you about Mayor.
Oh, I know.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments? Hearing none. Moving on to new business.
You want to say no? Okay.
To say something. Yeah, I think everybody knows me here. My name is Adolf Munsterman. Adolf Wayne Munsterman. Gary knows me. Dan knows me. Aniki knows me.
I'm over here.
He's over there.
Yeah. Okay. Here, got this sign with my name on it. My last name. That was put up by General Miller. I was 25 years at the guard here. None. And they want to take them down and put something else up. If they stay, if they don't stay, I'm gonna
They're just replacing them
be
with new
here
ones.
every time you have a meeting.
They're just putting them up with new signs, you know, they'll be the
That
same.
was my times.
Yeah.
Then I had lost a cousin and a nephew.
Yeah.
Because of that. I don't see, how many of your names are on any of these signs? None of them. Mine is.
Hey, did I take a house down with a camera next door to you? Did I take
Yeah,
a house down with a camera next door to you?
Yeah,
Has the council voted to move forward?
yeah, you tore down the house next door, because I watched him. And then he was out into court, because he was in the middle of the winter when it was about 40.
I've heard enough.
25, 30 below, he was supposed to be tearing down the house. And, the lawyer,
Okay, that's not the,
all they know there, but never showed up. So I mean, people, we need streets here fixed. We need alleys that fill in. Because if I have another front end that goes out of line, it's gonna be at your expense.
We are working on the streets, Adolph. We got a plan that we're working on.
all right, moving on to new business. Library concepts.
So the presentation mentioned two. Option A is for 6,900 square feet. Option B is for the 9,200 square feet. You heard presentations explaining why one was more than the other and which one they suggested for the city council. And just to be clear, Cindy also mentioned that the option A with 6,900 square feet is what she would recommend.
Motion to design concept A, 6,900 square feet for the library's construction at the 52-wing facility.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to go with plan A for 6,900 square feet. Will there be any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. General obligation bonds series 2021B.
So I'll call Ms. Green up here to speak with us about it. We're going to need to finance the library through a GO issuance.
Are you saving us money again?
Hopefully. Well, at least hopefully financing at a low rate.
There we are. We'll take that.
In your package tonight, you have posted these letters of Northland to provide advice to the city as very straightforward, same type of engagement letters we've been through the refinancing over the past year and a half. So nothing new here. Obviously, this just allows Northland to provide the city with information and advice related to the timing, the terms, the structure of the sale of municipal bonds. Certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And your engagement is as an underwriter, not as a municipal consultant, correct?
Correct. That does leave all of your options on the table. Northland can serve as underwriter. For the city to choose to want to move forward with a municipal advisor agreement, we can certainly step away from the role as underwriter and become a municipal advisor. The way that federal regulation works is that if you start out as underwriter, you can move into different positions. So municipal advisor, but if you start out as municipal advisor, you can't go back into the underwriter across the street in one direction, but not in the other. So that's why we typically start out as underwriter, but of course, if the city decides that they want us to serve in a different role, we can do that.
I'm going to ask you a speculative question. So as we're not going to go rated for this one, is that correct?
That is the city.
Mhm.
Depending on how.
It'll be done as of next week.
Okay. I would say to take action on the engagement first and then.
Okay. Good.
Motion to engage the services of Northland Securities as underwriters for the issuance of GO bonds series 2021B, the construction of a new library.
Motion has been made. Do we have a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Will there be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
to answer your question, Lily, I think that we should dig through the audit, see kind of how that sort of shaped up as we went through the rating process in 2020. There was a lot of mention of the interfund balances between the hospital and the city. So some of that has been cleared up. Potentially, the city may be in a better position to go through the rating process at that time. We chose not to do the rating process with the last new funding in an effort to sort of get that quickly and make sure that we're meeting the market at the right time. Certainly want to be aware of that as we go forward with this issuance as well, but we would have some additional time to review that. So that would be my suggestion.
How is the market right now? I mean, has it changed much since?
Not since the city has done the refunding. It's been pretty steady. We have a few ups and downs. Typically what's been happening for the past few months is that if we see an uptick in the market, that usually happens with days, and then we see the market get back again. Obviously, as the news cycle progresses, the market's going to react. So we're to say what's going to happen, but generally speaking, it's been rather steady.
And from looking at things initially, I'm not sure that going into a new rating is going to be the best option for the city. But if we go in unrated, do you think you'll be able to get us a competitive rate?
Yeah, absolutely. So Northland, we have sort of two separate ways that we operate. There's the municipal advisory side and there's the underwriting. And my position is within the public finance areas. I don't work on this. I actually work with cities. That being said, we have a number of issuers, cities, counties, et cetera, that issue bonds on a non-rated basis. So whether Northland is selling those bonds as underwriter or we're serving as municipal advisor and we're seeking bids from other underwriters, non-rated bonds. So yeah, and there's of course a market out there for the non-rated bonds that is slightly higher yield than say a bond that's rated A minus, and everyone's looking for yield. So there's a market for it. That's
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you.
Don't leave. We still need you. Thank you.
Resolution 2021-16 for broadband community development block grant.
As some members of the community might know, and city council certainly knows, we're in a unique time in our country, a unique time for the city of Appleton to possibly get broadband into our community. This was one of the big ones that was given to me when I was hired. Get us broadband. Well, we actually have an opportunity to do so now because of the American Rescue Plan Act that has been implemented at the federal level. Those funds can be used together through the state agencies, Minnesota Development, Economic Development and Employment Department, DEED. They have a community development block grant for coronavirus. And we could apply for that for the purposes of funding a broadband build out. Originally, we thought that the project would be about $6.2 million. After looking at the figures again, the build out was about $5.2 million, of which we're hoping to ask in our grant application of $3.1 million, leaving about $2 million outstanding for us to gap finance. The city of Appleton would contribute about $500,000 via a lease revenue bond mechanism, which Jessica will speak to a little bit later. The EDA has voted in favor of that mechanism and they will be the issuing authority for that process. I'm working with community business leaders to try to raise some of that money. We have a letter of support from Farmers and Merchant State Bank, and the county has agreed to fund a matching contribution of $100,000 towards this project so that we can have a very competitive grant application. Now, this is moving really fast. It's fast for me too. The government announced it, and then they didn't announce the rules. They announced the money, then they waited 4 months later to announce the rules. Then they waited another month to change the rules, and then they finally set up those rules, and then we all reacted to match that. So we are at a unique time in our country's history, and in the city of Appleton, there are people who might want to live here who haven't moved here because broadband, believe it or not, because they can't work remotely with connection that's not dependable. And this will help us to meet that change. So this is a worthy project for us. The way that the cost will break down is that the total estimate again is at $5.2 million. A provider, Federated, is going to their board to see about permission to raise $1.4 million to meet us halfway, if you will. So this application is going to be very, very competitive. We have a public hearing on Friday at 11 o'clock for this, which is one of the requirements of this application.
And just to go back on, it does seem fast, and it is fast.
Yeah.
It's important to get this in, to be first.
First come, first serve. It's money, so you want to be hot on the stepping for that. And when I tell you it's a tight turnaround, my office has started working on this 6 days ago, and it's due June 1st.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to do. So if you see me running around talking to myself,
But I think
that's what I'm doing.
I think going back, many, many years ago now, and I remember this topic coming up in for other councils and city administration that, they were trying to get this done back then, but at that time they couldn't come up with the means.
So one of the things that's fantastic and also a little hard about working government management is that nothing goes away. Everything is cyclical, but nothing gets thrown out either. I have been able to work on the work of previous city councils and city administrations. Because we had that information already set, we were able to build upon it. And thanks to that effort, this board, with all of its iterations and community members, we have been able to put forth together a very competitive application.
So a lot of the work was already done before you ever
A lot of the work was already done, but for the finance structure and having a provider that is willing to go out and build some of that.
Yep. Thank you.
Any questions from anybody out there?
Motion.
Motion to adopt resolution 2021-16 for the submission of a CDBD-CV grant application to deed for the building out of broadband services.
We have a second.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discipline of benefit policy procedures.
Duplication of benefits. This is again related to that application. And what it's saying is that the state says, as well as federal government, that if we receive any type of benefit that duplicates this resource, we would be responsible for paying that back. Now, as I explained to the members of the chamber here in the city council, this was a unique opportunity to get this grant. So I don't think there'll be too many grants like this available that will duplicate these resources. If they are, trust me, I'm watching, but the risk of that is rather low.
Motion to adopt duplication of benefits and procedures.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Citizen participation plan.
This again, as mentioned earlier, is part of the CDBG CV grant application. It requires that citizens participate and bring any concerns or questions to the surface before we go ahead and submit the application. And again, that public hearing has been published, and it is this Friday at 11 a.m. here in the council chambers.
Motion to adopt a citizens participation program and hold a public hearing on Friday, May 28th, 2021 at 11 a.m. where residents will be able to voice any questions and concerns they may have in relative to the CDBG CV grant application for broadband services.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Will there be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Conflict of interest disclosure.
This again is in relation to this grant submission. The federal government, state government wants to make sure that none of the city council members have a conflict of interest in appearance or in fact relative to the build out of the broadband services and relative to this grant application that we're going to submit.
Motion to approve the mayor sign the conflict of interest disclosure form indicating that neither he nor any other member of the city council has a conflict of interest in appearance or in fact as it relates to the city submission of the CDBG-CV grant application.
Do we have a second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Deed federal requirements and certifications.
This again is in relation to this grant application. Federal government requires that we agree as a community to certify and adhere to all federal requirements in addition to procurement guidelines. So if we're going to work with a provider, they would have to procure for that bid basically.
Motion to adopt all federal performance and procurement requirements associated to the city's CDBG-CV application.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. UMBRCD professional services communication, $12,000.
This is the professional services contract between the city and RDC to help put this major grant together in less than 10 days.
So it's a commission to the Upper Minnesota Development Commission for these services.
Yep, so they're working with my office to submit this grant.
Yes. Motion to accept professional services contract UMB Upper Minnesota Rural Development Commission for the submission of a CDBG-CV grant application for broadband services.
Do we have a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Lease revenue bond issues.
This again is related to this application, to showing the strength of the application and the community, the city's commitment to that application, to the development of broadband. Given the city's past tax abatements and commitment to development of local economy here, some of our tax abatement bonds are already engaged in helping drive that. So we don't have room on that side. What we have room on is to do this lease revenue mechanism to get that 500K that we need for this application. And for that, I'll bring Jessica up to chat with us about it. And just as a note, I mentioned this earlier, but the EDA did vote in favor of this because this particular funding mechanism comes through the channel of the EDA.
So in Minnesota, there is not clear authority to borrow for broadband. Think about it like street improvement projects, et cetera, where there's the ability to assess in Minnesota state law. So there's a few mechanisms, as Lily mentioned, there's the ability to use geo tax abatement bonds. Currently, the city has committed its abatement authority, so that is not an option for the city at this time. So the other mechanism is something called lease revenue bonds. And I won't go down the rabbit hole of explaining exactly all the details of that tonight. I know you have a ton on your agenda. But what you have in your packet is another engagement letter for Northland to assist with the preparation of preparing for the issuance of lease revenue bonds should that grant be received and should find a provider to partner with. And I don't know that I mentioned this during the previous discussion on the other engagement letter. If this doesn't move forward, there are no fees due to Northland unless we actually help issue bonds for this purpose. This is, again, by federal regulation, allows us to provide you with information and advice relating to the timing and structure and terms of municipal security. This would be an issuance technically of the EDA, whereby the city would consent to that issue. But it is an arrangement between the city and the EDA. There are many documents that sort of govern that relationship. But the piece that's before you tonight is the engagement letter of Northland to assist with the process.
And I would be remiss if I don't mention, this is a very serious thing to do. So could you please talk about the appropriation responsibilities of the city as it relates to this?
Yes, thank you. So the way that lease revenue bonds work, that the EDA issues the bonds and then they enter into a lease arrangement with the city. So the city pays rent or lease payments to the EDA. The EDA uses those funds to make the debt service payment. Now, in the case of something like broadband improvements, we would anticipate that the provider the city is working with is taking in revenues from the system and then providing to the city would then be taking that money and changing over to the EDA to pay the bond. The lease revenue bonds have annual appropriation language. So if the city decided that they were going to not appropriate and not pay that lease, EDA doesn't have money to make those bond payments, therefore the EDA we would have a 1-year debt service reserve requirement for the bonds. So that if something were to happen, investors would at least have 1 year of debt service before the bonds were in default. That means that even though there is that lease appropriation language and the city can technically get out of it by not appropriating, you don't want to do that. It would have serious implications for the city going forward if we were ever to issue debt again. We've seen this in one other city. In sort of the metro area, that happened. Investors went after the city and there were actually judgment funds that were issued to pay off the investors. So there is a certain level of recourse that could happen, but this would not be considered a general obligation of the city whereby you can tax. This is a lease arrangement between the city and the EDA. So different type of animal than what we've been dealing with over the past years and what the city's issued previously. A little bit more of a challenge to sell in the marketplace because it's a geo-pledge. But certainly if you're working with a provider that's familiar with the area and has that outreach, that certainly lends some confidence to the issue.
So does that, do you have the, like, so when you do this, do you have like Federated or whoever you're gonna work with, they're committed to a certain percentage of what we will get? So I mean, it's not all of a sudden we have to come up with the whole, pay the EDA.
The city would have a lease with the provider.
So
So
that
in this
would be
case,
what-
you're mentioning Federated, it may not be Federated.
Yeah, but I mean, say it was Federated, then they would, then we could use that to pay the RDC then.
Well, not the RDC, to pay the debt service.
Yep, so the EDA would enter into a lease with the city would then like sell these to the provider.
Okay.
But that's figured in before it happens. I mean, that's not something that's negotiated after the fact, correct?
That's correct. And for those of you listening at home and our audience here, I know that when I started studying public finance and all this fun stuff, I was like, well, if somebody's giving me a loan, I know what's in my checking account. It doesn't work like that here. Just because there's an institution that's willing and can lend us millions of dollars doesn't mean that we lawfully can accept that loan. We're subject to ad valorem taxes and those tax capacity limits. We cannot exceed those. We have to do everything within a certain guidelines over a period of time that's accepted by law. Did I miss something, Danielle, or? Nope.
No.
Okay. So don't go away yet. There's one more for you, but thank you.
Motion to engage with Northland Securities as underwriters for the issuance of lease revenue bonds for the financing of broadband improvements.
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Capitalization policy.
So moving from public finance to accounting, on the financial statements, your depreciation is a non-cash asset that represents your financial position. We don't want to misstate our financial position. If you are capitalizing fixed assets at a low value, too low a value, then that means your depreciation keeps building and building and building, and it makes your available money or your available assets less available. So what we want to do is establish a workable threshold. I am suggesting $5,000, which is in line with a lot of other municipalities, a capitalization threshold of $5,000 before fixed assets can be capitalized and depreciated over their useful lives.
So this is a way, this will strengthen the financial situation of the city is.
Yep, and it's something that the auditors have been asking of the city from before I got here.
Okay.
It's on my honey-do list and I'm finally getting to it.
Yep. Motion to adopt capitalization policy establishing a threshold of $5,000 before fixed assets can be capitalized and depreciated over the useful lives.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Resolution 2021-17 to transfer negative balance from garbage fund to the general fund.
Previous administration's practice had city office staff member accounts being deducted for the percentage of investment of their daily work hours in individual enterprise funds. My office changed that in 2019 because I saw an accumulation of negative cash balances. The auditors have identified as much in the garbage fund and the 603 fund. And I'm asking for the city council to transfer that negative cash balance over to the general fund that can handle that so that the 603 fund performs without this negative cash balance. The 603 fund was designed and put together for payment of services by Mathiasen for garbage collection and also for any kind of improvements thereof. The city had not authorized for previous administration to deduct from that fund. Anything that happens with the fund balances of a city in the state of Minnesota must be voted through in a statutory A city by the city council. Without the city council's authority, it cannot be executed. My office found a mistake and we've corrected it. And now I'm asking city council to take the last step and transfer it to the general fund unrestricted accounts.
We have a motion.
Motion to adopt resolution 2021-17 to transfer $70,320 of negative cash balances from the city's garbage enterprise account 603 to the city of Appleton unrestricted general fund accounts.
We have a second. Second. Motion has been made and seconded to transfer negative funds. Any other discussion?
For those of you keeping track at home and here present, this doesn't represent cash. There's no money leaving the city. It's moving a negative cash balance that needs to be accounted for appropriately into a fund that can handle that negative cash balance.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Otter Tail LED street light and area lighting dusk to dawn. Wastewater facility annual cost $782.16.
The wastewater facility is really dark, and when it's dead of winter, it gets like dark out here, like 3:30 sometimes. So it's dangerous for our employees, and we want to make sure that they're safe. It would cost us that $782.16 for the entire year. We pay for that, but Otter Tail installs it and maintenance is it. $65 a month, essentially. It's not a big cost.
Well, it can be a dangerous place to work, and without the proper light, I think it makes it much more dangerous. I think it's a good idea if we take a look at this.
Especially when it's out in the country like it is. I mean, it's not like it's in town where you have the street lights for the background. I mean, it's all on its own.
And just to make sure this is paying for an annual light cost of it's an annual thing of $782. And they're going to put up all the lights for that too?
Yep. So, I mean, you work in construction. How much would you charge us to do that?
It'll be more than that. And then just the maintenance, you know, when the lights go out or bulbs or whatever, it's a huge deal.
Don't give them any ideas.
Motion to approve that the city participate in the Otter Tail's Dusk to Dawn program for having adequate lighting installed and maintained by Otter Tail at the City of Appleton wastewater facility.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Purchase above procurement policy threshold.
If these are the invoices that have come in that are above the $5,000 threshold established by city council, $214,000 of this has already been refunded through the PFA bond that we are working for the water plant, which is Magni Construction and Apex in this case. The rest of them are things that we need, you know, our lease on the Rosen pumper out there in the fire, you know, we got to pay this. The hospital's AC unit will pay it now, they reimburse us. The county assesses us for the assessments that they do for us. Then the McQueen, our street sweeper, is currently, it's not doing so hot. We got to save it. And that's what it'll cost us. And then KS State Bank, that is representative of the breathing apparatus for the fire department. This is the annual payment.
Motion to approve the payment of $307,090.19 of invoices for goods and services above the city's established purchase policy threshold.
Do we have a second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Will be any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Gambling permit application for Appleton Area Foundation.
The Appleton Area Foundation would like to have a raffle on the 27th of August, and they're asking for permission.
Motion to approve Appleton Area Health Foundation gambling permit on August 27th, 2021 pursuant to the Minnesota Gambling Control Board as prescribed by Minnesota Statute 349.166C.
Second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Eat Just Protein Expansion Development Agreement.
Leadership at Eat Just Protein has communicated with my office, and they're requesting assistance with their expansion. They are planning to create jobs here of all levels and expand their property. And we can get into a development agreement with them to help them along those lines. We have issued development agreements in the past that have had tax abatement portions and also tax incremental finance portions. Because of what we mentioned a little earlier, we only have one of those mechanisms available, but they are a worthy firm. They are a new firm, and they're very promising. I think it would be wise for the city to help this business go forward so we can create substantial jobs here. And for that, I'd like to call Jessica up to talk about that.
I promise this is the last time. Okay, Mayor and Council, what you have before you tonight is Willie mentioned having some conversations with the city, and it appears that they will be seeking some financial assistance from the city. And as we mentioned, abatement is not currently an option for the city, as the city's abatement authority is committed elsewhere. So our understanding of the project is that they operate a manufacturing facility, and that would work well with taxing and financing for an economic development district. With that in mind, and with the anticipation of a full request for that financial assistance, Northland would propose to serve as a consultant for the city to analyze the request, look at findings for establishing a tax increment financing district, looking at the analysis of what that district may produce in terms of increments generally, and then going through sort of the coordination of providing the necessary notifications to the school board to the county, preparing the hearing notice, those types of things. The scope of services that is in front of you tonight outlines all of the various activities that Northland will be doing for the city and on behalf of the city. I can read all of those tonight. There is a not to exceed compensation amount in there of up to $9,000. Now, we charge on an hourly basis, but we do like to have the not to exceed amount in there so that the city is surprised at any point, so Northland has an idea of what that budget is. That being said, that compensation can be recouped from the developer seeking assistance if he wants to escrow with them. Otherwise, if the district is established, you can reimburse yourself later on from the collection of that increment and the amount the city set aside for administrative purposes. So it wouldn't be a hard cost to the city should this project move forward. So with that said, I'm happy to answer questions and I'm going to keep it very brief. But if the council is interested in looking at potentially tax
For our residents at home and those here present, we have to take care to explain this as best we can. Please keep me on track if I'm veering off. So tax incremental finance, the increment is what would be returned to Aegis Protein, right? 95% of that increment pursuant to the law?
Up to the city, you are allowed to keep up to 10% for administrative purposes. So that goes from everything that goes along with establishing the district. So certainly Northland fees, you would have fees related to the actual development that is prepared by and then you would have the annual fees of 10 reporting this required by the state. So those can be pulled back, but you can certainly do less. It all depends on what that flow of increment looks like and how much you think.
Okay, and then in terms of the typical structure of a development agreement, they would need to provide proof of creating these jobs, right? They would need to provide proof that they've been contributing to developing this land. And they would need to pay their taxes on time and provide proof thereof, correct?
Yes, there's a pay as you go note when you're issuing that note back to them. So if they don't pay their taxes, they don't get that reimbursement.
So there's, and I'm doing this on purpose, going this route on purpose because concerned citizens have asked me about this. This is not a tax freebie, correct?
No, I certainly would say that. So economic development districts are the shortest type of tax increment district. So it's an 8-year district. So increment is allowed to be collected 8 years from the time of first collection, technically 9 years total. But what the city is essentially getting is that fee for that expansion. We don't know what's going to translate into total property tax value and what that increase is. But what happens is the value that exists today is frozen. That expansion value that is created, that is where the increment comes from. So it's the cities, counties, and school districts portion of taxes. That comes back to the city. Whatever you decide to hold back for administrative expenses would be held by the city, and then the remaining would be sent back to the developer. Once that district expires, then your tax value is realized and gained by the city overall. So no, I certainly wouldn't call it a freebie. They are still paying their taxes. And the city gets the benefit of having an expanded facility here.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that.
Any other questions? Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. I believe it's very valuable to a business that's trying to expand and, build more jobs and put more jobs in Appleton. And sounds like jobs of every level. And that's important to our town so that we can grow and prosper. And I was one of the 30 years ago, we were one of the businesses in towns that were able to take advantage of that in our business. And I know how important it was to us to get us up off the ground. And for that reason, I'm definitely in support of this.
We have a motion.
Motion to authorize the city administrator begin the work of establishing a development agreement with Aegis Protein Incorporated to assist that local business with their expansion project within the city of Appleton.
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Northland Securities Engagement Development Agreement.
Motion to engage with Northland Securities and financial planning agreement for the establishment of a tax increment finance district.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Carl property on 501 West Toki.
Motion to reimburse the Carl family $2,302.25 for demolition upon completion to the reimbursement of Mr. Persky $2,500 for his completion of demolition pursuant to the established guidelines of the city and county's demolition reimbursement program.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
So the Carl family is not getting the total $2,500 reimbursement. That's because they chose a bid that was 20% higher. So we are pursuant to the county's recommendations, we have to deduct that amount of their reimbursement. So that's why they're not getting the same amount. Actually, excuse me, 6.9% difference. So.
Well, there again, I applaud these property owners for taking this stuff down and improving the look of our town.
It's huge. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ronning property, 237 South Paul, demolition. Whether or not to consider the structure commercial or residential.
If I wanted to talk about this property a little bit, there is an expectation that it should be reimbursed after it gets demolished as a commercial property. But I gotta say, it is registered with the county and also pursuant to our city zoning ordinances as a private property, not commercial. So I want to turn this over to you guys because I'm tired of people saying that I'm mean. So you decide.
Well, it's always been residential. I mean, it hasn't been paying any commercial taxes or anything.
I was about to ask you if you remember it being commercial, because I certainly don't.
No, Earl Maynard owned it years and years ago, and he worked for the state on the highway department.
Yeah.
And all he had actually done was had something to do, hobby farm a little bit. I mean, there was never anything sold out of there that I can ever remember. So I don't know. My feelings is that it goes as residential.
Another thing important to mention is that when somebody's participating in the demolition projects and they hire a contractor to do this, the city has no control over that private agreement. It's a private agreement. So in this capacity, my office won't be involved in verifying their insurance. What my office will be involved in is in verifying that they mitigated asbestos, if any, because we're going to be using the permit by rule site that our city controls right now. But we're not checking their insurance and stuff because it's a private venture.
I'd imagine this property would be treated like the rest of them and all concrete would go out to the city dump site and the rest of the materials would go out to the site that we have open now and and then everything in it that might be in it right now can't go into that dump site.
Well, they did their asbestos checking. And
Oh, okay.
they didn't have any asbestos at all. So everything should be able to go in there.
Okay. Motion to establish that the property located at 237 South Paul Street be considered a private property as it pertains to the city and county demolition reimbursement program.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Can we-
Motion carries. Gary abstained.
Okay.
Glacial Plains conditional use permit.
Motion to approve Glacial Plains conditional use permit.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Altoona conditional use permit.
Motion to approve Alan Tonak's conditional use permit.
Motion has been made. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Still not in favor of it. Because I still think we're gonna open a can of worms, but let's vote.
Well, does anyone else here got anything to say before we vote on this? Anybody else here got anything to say? Anything from the crowd before we vote on this?
I don't know. I mean, I understand the reason for doing it and I'm 100% behind it, but I mean, we're going to have individuals that are going to take this to the nth degree and we're going to have them coming in and they're going to want turkeys and banties. And I mean, I can just see it coming from a mile away. I don't know. That's my opinion. But I do, I mean, if he's already bought the, you know, I mean, you got to think of that too, but I just don't know. I don't. That's
The
my opinion.
coops or whatever, yeah, I know. I can see both sides of it. The way that that I understand the variance is that he has to get abutting properties permission, but, you know, it makes me wonder, what about across the alley? What about across the street? You know, now I'm opening up another can of worms, but,
No, it's,
you know, I guess,
I just know we're gonna have trouble down the road. We're gonna be fighting people that come through the door that wanna have.
Danielle and I and Emma, and we're sorry, but we can't help you with this.
right.
You know, we let you know if they've submitted the application on time and
Yeah.
met all the requirements. And in terms
Yeah.
of that, we give a recommendation on that basis alone. But you guys know your city, so this is on you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, it's not an easy one, but.
No, all of us know Al, you know,
Mhm.
and I'm sure he'd do a very good job. It's just, it's a forever thing.
Can we put conditions, additional conditions? Or is it pretty much thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yeah.
I think this is a thumbs up, thumbs down situation. I think that the conditions would be for the person submitting them. So if the motion fails, state the reason why it fails, and then have him reapply and incorporate those conditions into his permit application.
I'm sure he wants to buy chicks before he can't buy them, but at least locally. But I guess, I can see both sides of it. If it's, I'm sure he'd do a decent job of it
Well,
in terms of keeping it clean.
Danielle, this is a question for you. If we do table this and want to put more restrictions on it, how do we, I mean, do you have more neighbors in a bigger area or how do we?
Again, I think as Ms. Morales kind of indicated, you either say, yes, approve it as it's requested, or you can say, no, we're not going to. And then if you have certain things, like you want to do time limitations, you want to do size limitations, you want certain cleanliness issues to be met, that's something that you could put on the record that you're looking for as factors that you consider, and then he can reapply and address those factors.
In order to just kind of thinking about trying to give him a for sure answer in a timely manner. Is this something we could add to the special meeting agenda?
No.
No? Okay. I didn't know how that would work.
Just as a point of clarification, nothing would prevent the individual from submitting a new permit application. So
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. One more.
it fails.
Almost 2 and 2.
2 and 2.
So then you as the mayor, you have the legal authority to break that tie. Sorry, that is actually the law, right?
That's correct.
Well, I mean, what I'd like to do is have it tabled and have them resubmit.
So then it fails.
Do we establish at this time what we would want
I
to see
think we all
differently?
gotta just sit down and think about it, write it down on a piece of paper.
We'll just email Willie.
Yeah.
And come in with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, except for you. You can write it on a piece of paper.
Yep.
Okay,
I like that better than computers.
I understand.
Bob Emery, variance request.
Motion to approve Bob Emery's, pardon me, Bob Emery's variance request.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Full-time custodial, city custodian position.
I am asking the city council to consider allowing the establishment of a full-time custodian. Right now, we have a part-time custodian, and we can't keep a qualified candidate and recruit somebody for that limited amount of hours. The city, during the summer especially, has a lot of cleaning to do with the fish house and the bathroom and the campground. As of when we build the 52-wing library, we're going to have an extra building to clean over there. Right now, we have a part-time person doing that. We really need a little bit more structure so that all of the city's own buildings are clean. The airport hangar area, this city civic center, the new shop, the old shop, as we start to consider using that more. And we can't attract good quality candidates for a role this small.
We just hired the one we got full-time.
And she's going to be resigning because it's not enough hours.
I think it's a good idea. There is a lot of cleaning that needs to be done.
I can tell you from a little bit of time that I did it, that there's always more that can be done. That there'd be no reason for a full-time custodian to have, sit around. I can tell you that for sure.
All right, do we have a motion?
Motion to allow that a full-time city custodian position be established.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Mowing bid, Kranz Construction, lowest responsible bidder.
Yep, we had 3 very qualified applicants, Mr. Hughes, Mr. Norenberg, and Mr. Krantz. Mr. Krantz was the lowest bid, and they met all the requirements of the bid, and asked the city council to formally accept them.
Motion to formally accept Kranz Construction mowing bid in the amount of $22,950.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Will there be any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Old business.
Look, you have a transaction summary before you. If you want me, I can go through it, or you can take it home and read it with you. It's also available online for those of you at home, and it tells you how the city has been using its money this past month.
I'll read that.
Any other old business? Hearing none, moving on. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion. I don't know who went first. Go ahead.
Heineke motioned it, you seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all at home.